Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? Hope you all are doing fine and the preparation for paper one is going along all good. Well, today I brought for you all May-June 2024 2281 and 0455 variant 12. Now, this paper was a very interesting one. Why? Because there were a lot of questions that were repeated, and there were a couple of questions which were not difficult, yet there was a trick in those questions. And after the paper, the feedback I received from students was that they kind of got a little confused. Now, once we are doing those questions, I'll refer to which questions were those and how should we address those questions. Now, a word of advice before we proceed to this paper. I know we've got a paper one this Tuesday, and just a little bit of advice to you all, though we all are quite familiar with the paper pattern, yet I just wanted to readdress the particular things, just to reinforce the particular things. 45 minutes will be given to you, 30 questions will be there. Do not dwell more than 1.5 minutes on each MCQ. I repeat, not more than 1.5 minutes be spent in solving each MCQ. The first 20 questions will be based on microeconomics topics. The last 10 would be referring to the macroeconomic topics. Keep your definitions intact. Do not get overwhelmed once you see a bar graph or a population pyramid or questions which ask you for calculations regarding the price elasticity of demand or the price elasticity of supply or calculation of total revenue, or if you see the cost curves or if you see pie charts. Just do not get overwhelmed by the questions. No need to get anxious. We've been solving multiple questions. The trick to solving those questions is to solve them by reading the responses, by reading the options available, and then looking at the responses. Like I told you, there will be in each MCQ two of the responses that you can easily eliminate, and you will be left with the final two MCQ options, out of which you need to decide which is the correct response, which is the correct answer. And that too can be easily identified. A, if you've got your concepts revised, if you've got your concepts clear, if you know the definitions by heart, if you have gone through the formulas thoroughly, you will no need to be anxious or worried. All right. Finally, my piece of advice would be do not leave any MCQ unanswered. Reason, there's no negative marking. So it's always wise to give an informed guess. Just give an informed guess to those questions which you find difficult, but do not leave it like that. You never know. You might just make an informed guess, and what if the answer is correct, right? All right. So let's proceed. All right. On my right, you can see the answer sheet similar to what you'll be getting in the exam, and you need to shade in your responses in this bubble sheet. All right. So the first question talks about why will scarcity always exist? Now, again, this refers to the problem of the basic economic problem, which we all know is what? That wants are unlimited, yet resources are limited. So, keeping the definition in mind, let's look at the options they are asking us. A says there are high costs of production, B says there are low levels of education, C says there are unlimited resources, and D says there are unlimited wants. Yes, so the correct answer, as we all know, is D. Easy? One is D. All know there are unlimited wants and the resources are limited. Number two. Number two talks about opportunity cost. They say a student decides to take up a 2-year apprenticeship for which she will earn 10,000 per year. After that, she expects to earn 25,000 per year. She could take an unskilled job which pays 16,000 per year instead of the apprenticeship. What is the opportunity cost in the 2 years of completing the apprenticeship? Now, you see, they have given us three pieces of information and one we will not take into consideration. The point they are saying that she expects to earn 25,000 per year has no it's a piece of information which we'll not take into consideration when we are keeping this decision. Why? Because we need to look at what is the opportunity cost she is foregoing if she decides to complete the apprenticeship. See, if she decides to take the apprenticeship, she will be earning 10,000 per year, which means what? 2 into 10,000 per year will give us 20,000 per year, right? So it will give us 20,000 per year. However, if instead of the apprenticeship, she decides to opt for the unskilled job, so she'll be earning 16,000 per year. So this means what? 2 into 16,000 per year is going to give us 32,000 per year in total. So if she was not doing the apprenticeship, she would have been earning 32,000. Yet if she is taking the apprenticeship, she's getting 20,000. So the difference in the two is what? That's the opportunity cost she's foregoing by opting for the apprenticeship. So 32,000 subtracted from 20,000 will give us 12,000. So this 12,000 is the opportunity cost in the 2 years of completing the apprenticeship. So the correct answer for number 2 is B. Hope this is clear. Number 3. Number 3 shows us the PPC curve, the production possibility curve. Now look at the PPC curve carefully. The vertical axis displays the capital goods. The horizontal axis displays the consumer goods. Now look at the question. The question is asking which current combination of capital and consumer goods would produce the greatest number of consumer goods in the future. They are asking us which combination of capital and consumer goods you should choose by remaining on the PPC that in the future would yield the highest amount of consumer goods, right? So we need to opt for those combination of consumer and capital goods, which in the future would be providing the economy with the highest number of consumer goods. Now, they've already given us a hint. You see, the highest number of consumer goods would only be provided if we have more capital goods now. Why? Because we all know capital goods are what? Capital goods are human-made goods used in production, right? Capital goods are human-made goods used in production. On the other hand, consumer goods are goods which are for our own personal consumption. So by concentrating more towards the production of capital goods, we will be what? Safeguarding ourselves for the production and the availability of more consumer goods in the future, right? Now, keeping that in mind, we should opt for the highest amount of capital goods. We should opt for the highest amount of that combination which yields us the highest amount of capital goods. So now looking at the options available, A says O and Q. So O is here, which means zero amount of capital goods and Q amount of consumer goods. This you will chop off because it doesn't make sense at all. B says P and O. P means the highest amount of capital goods and zero amount of consumer goods. Yes, that's the correct answer. However, let's look at C and D as well. C says R and S. This means this amount of capital goods and this amount of consumer goods. So you want to be somewhere here. And D says U and V, which means this amount of capital goods and this much amount of consumer goods. So this means you want to be somewhere here according to D or C. But the wisest decision is to be option B, like I said, the highest number of capital goods. Why? Because the aim is to provide for the highest number of consumer goods in the future, right? So keeping that intention in mind, for 3, it has to be B. I hope this is clear. Number 4. Number 4 says, what is not a macroeconomic topic? This means there's only going to be one answer, one option, which is a macroeconomic topic, and the rest 3 will not be macroeconomic. They will be microeconomic topics. So now let's look at the options. A says the growth in the Chinese GDP. That's a macroeconomic topic. B says the level of consumer price index inflation in the UK. Again, CPI. That's a macroeconomic topic that you can chop off. Eliminate that. Number C says the level of unemployment in Spain. Again, unemployment is a macroeconomic topic. And D says the total output of the German car industry. Now, why it's a macroeconomic it's not a macroeconomic topic, and it's a microeconomic topic because it is referring to a particular industry. It is referring to a particular sector. It is not talking about the aggregates of the economy. Once you're talking about the aggregates of the economy, that means we are referring to the macroeconomic topics. Once we are referring to topics which are micro-related, industry-related, particular industry-related, particular sector-related, sector-related, we are referring to microeconomic topics. Hence, by elimination and by logic, I have shown you that for MCQ number 4, the correct answer is D. All right, let's look at MCQ number 5. So far, so good. All right. Number 5. Number 5 says, what is likely to cause an extension in demand for a firm's fruit drink? Now, before I solve this MCQ, come on, tell me, when does an extension in demand comes and when do we talk about shifts? Yes, extension or contraction. Whenever we are talking about extension and contraction, that is due to the price of the product itself. However, when we are talking about shifts, that is due to factors other than the price of the product itself. Now, look at the options. A says that the question is what is likely to cause an extension in demand for a firm's fruit drink. A says a period of hot weather. B says a reduction in the cost of producing the drink. C says a rival firm leaving the market. D says a successful advertising campaign by the firm. Now, D says a successful advertising campaign by the firm, a rival firm leaving the market, and a period of hot weather. All are factors which will cause shifts. So, if it's a shift, it will cause an increase in demand that will cause a shift, a hot weather. Rival firm leading the market will also cause a shift, and a successful advertising will also. It's only option B, which is talking about a reduction in the cost of producing the drink. Why? Because this way, what will happen? That a rise in quantity demanded is caused by a fall in the price of the product itself. Because there's a fall in the price of the product itself, so there would be a fall in its price, leading to an increase in the demand for the product, demand for the fruit drink. Right? Hope this is clear. So for 5, it has to be B. All right. Let's look at MCQ number 6. MCQ number 6 says supermarkets sell petrol gas outside their stores. They reduce the price of the petrol below the suppliers to attract more customers to buy goods in the store when they buy more petrol. Now, they intentionally reduce the price of petrol or gas in order to attract more customers so that once they are there at the petrol station, they even purchase stuff from the shop that is located at that petrol station. Now they're saying if this was successful, that means if this plan of these petrol stations work, how might it be shown on a demand and a supply diagram? Now, let's look at the responses. Demand and supply diagram for petrol and demand and supply diagram for the goods. Now, if this intention, if the strategy of the petrol station works, what do you think should be the demand and the supply diagram? There should be a shift to the left or shift to the right and shift of the supply curve or shift of the demand curve. Now, if the plan is implemented and successful, you see more consumers will be attracted. Why? Because cheap petrol prices, which means they will also be going inside the store. So the store's goods demand will increase, right? So when the demand for the store's good increase, what will happen? What will happen? That there would be a shift of the demand curve to the right, right? So it has nothing to do with the supply curve. It has nothing to do with the supply curve here. So you can chop A and you can chop C. You see, we need to satisfy both part of the MCQ. So it's nothing related to the supply of the goods. Here, it has to be related to the demand. So the demand for the store's goods will increase. So either it has to be D only because shift of the demand curve to the right will take place. Because in B, it's saying shift of the demand curve to the left. No, it cannot be. Right? And The first part of it says the demand and the supply diagram for the petrol. The shift the supply curve to the right. Yes, why? Because the supply of the petrol will increase. You will be able, because they are willing and able to sell more and more petrol at reduced prices. So the supply curve for the petrol will shift outwards, and the demand curve for the other goods at the store will shift to the right. Right? So the supply curve will shift to the right for the petrol, and the demand curve for the goods will move to the right. Right? So for 6, it has to be D. All right, let's look at number 7. Number 7 says, which statement describes a market in disequilibrium? Now we know a market is in disequilibrium when the supply and the demand diagram doesn't meet, when the supply and the demand curves do not meet, right? When there's no equilibrium, they do not intersect. A says excess demand results from a government maximum price below the equilibrium price. Yes, that's the correct answer. But before that, let's look at the other option. B says the point where the demand and the supply curves cross. So if this is the demand and this is the supply and this is the point where the demand and the supply intersect, this means we are already at equilibrium. So it's against the statement they're making. They want a situation of disequilibrium. We can chop B off. C says price changes cause further changes in both demand and supply. So this means there has been a change in price, but then because of that, the demand and the supply has changed. So there comes again an equilibrium situation. So again, you can chop C off because here we want a disequilibrium. D says the quantity demanded by the consumers equals the quantity supplied by the producer. This means what? Again, we are a situation of equilibrium. So you will chop D because here we want a situation of disequilibrium. So you chop D off. Now, by elimination, we've chopped B, C, D. Now let's look at A again. Why? By logic. A says excess demand results from a government maximum price below the equilibrium price. Below the equilibrium price. So this means what? This means this is the demand and supply diagram. And this was the equilibrium price. And government has introduced this maximum price. So now this maximum price has created what? This is the supply. This is the demand. This is the price. And this is the quantity. Now this is the quantity supplied. And this is the quantity demanded. This all shaded region is the excess demand. This is again a situation of disequilibrium. Why? Because this was the equilibrium price and this is the maximum price. Right? All right. So for number 7, the correct answer is A. This is clear. Now, let's look at number 8. Number 8 talks about price elasticity of supply. It's a simple question. All you need to do is put in the formula and put in the data available, and you'll arrive at the correct answer. Now, let's read the question. In response to an increase in price from $5 per kg to $6 per kg, a farmer increased supply from 400 kgs to 500 kgs per week. What is the price elasticity of supply? Now, 5 per kg is the initial price. 6 per kg is the new price. Initial supply is 400 kg and the new supply is 500 kg. Now, we know price elasticity of supply is what? Price elasticity of supply is percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. First, we'll calculate percentage change in quantity supplied. Percentage change in quantity supplied will be equal to what? The new supply, which is 500, minus the initial supply, which is 400, divided by the initial supply, which was again 400 kgs, multiplied by 100. So this would give us 100 divided by a 400 into 100, which is equals to a 25%. Right? This is what? Percentage change in quantity supplied. Next, what will we calculate? Next, we'll calculate percentage change in price. Percentage change in price is what? The new, which was the 6 per kg, minus the initial price, which was 5 per kg, divided by the initial price, which was again 5 per kg, into the 100, which is equals to what? Equals to 20%. Now, what will you do? We'll divide percentage change in quantity supplied, which is 25%, divided by percentage change in price, which is 20%. So a 25% divided by a 20% is going to give you 1.25. So price elasticity of supply is 1.25. So correct answer for number 8 is 1.25, which is option B. Hope this is clear. Be careful in identifying the new and the initial price, the new and the initial quantity, and put in the amount in the formula, and you'll arrive at the correct answer. You have the availability of the calculator. You can use the calculator, so there's no need to getting anxious, and you'll arrive at the correct answer, hopefully. Right? Now let's look at number 9. Number 9 says, which government measure is most likely to cause a fall both in price and in quantity traded? So now we want a fall in the price and the quantity traded both. Now, which do you think should be the correct response? Now, B says a subsidy. Now, if there's a subsidy will cause a fall in the price, but will cause an increase in the quantity. But here we want a fall in both. So you can chop B off. Option C says a minimum price. So if there's a minimum price would cause what? A minimum price would cause a rise in the price and a what? A fall in the quantity. But we want a fall in both. So you can chop C off. A says indirect taxes. Now, once indirect taxes are imposed, the price will increase and the quantity demanded would fall. So you can chop A as well. Why? Because we want a fall in both price and quantity demanded. So by elimination, we've chopped A, C, and D. So we've arrived at B. That is the correct answer. But now let's look at also why logically it has to be the maximum price. Now, what is a maximum price? A maximum price, like we figured it out earlier, is the one which is imposed below the equilibrium price. So if this is the supply, and if this is the demand, and if this was the equilibrium quantity, now if the government has imposed a maximum price, which is this. So now you can see, looking at this is the quantity supplied, and this is the quantity demanded. And now this is the shortage created, and now this is the amount the suppliers are willing to sell, and this is the amount the consumers are willing to buy. However, it's not available. There will exist a shortage. So this means what? There is a fall in the amount of quantity traded, because initially this was the amount of quantity being traded, and now only this is the amount which is being traded. So there is a fall in the quantity traded, yes. And yes, there is a fall in the price as well, because initially the price, the equilibrium price, is relatively higher than what now is being imposed by way of the maximum price. So both the situations are being satisfied once it's maximum price. Hence, the correct answer for number 9 is B. Right? Hope this is clear. Number 10. The number 10 is a question which was repeated. It has come in the past as well. However, the students got a little confused. Why? Because probably the ER gave another answer, but in the marking scheme, probably there was an error to the answer. So some candidates got confusing the answer. However, it's easy. It's again referring to the concept of the minimum wages. Now let's look at the diagrams. The first diagram shows us the wage rate of cleaners. The second talks about the wage rates for the nurses. They say what would be the result if a national minimum wage of OM is introduced. So now if the government imposes a wage rate of OM, what would be the impact on the wages for the cleaners and for the nurses? Now initially, you see, if we are talking about the wage rate for the cleaners, now they were here. The at WC, that was the wage rate for the cleaners, which was in equilibrium position. Now if they have imposed a wage rate above the equilibrium. So now what should be for the situation for the wage rate of the cleaners? Yes, the wage rate for the cleaners has risen, right? The wage rate for the cleaners has risen. So now by looking at the options, you can chop A and B, because they say wage rate has fallen and no change. So you can chop A and B. So either it has to be C or it either has to be D. Now let's look at for the weighted for the nurses. Now imposing OM means what? For the nurses, it means below the equilibrium position. So you see, minimum wage is only workable if it is imposed above the equilibrium. But for nurses, it is imposed below the equilibrium. So this means it will bring no change. You see, an effective minimum wage rate is one which is always above the equilibrium wage rate, right? So keeping that concept in mind, for the nurses, it will bring no change to their wage rate. Hence, the correct answer for number 10 will be number 11. What would cause a decrease in spending by households in a country? So now they are saying what will cause a spending by households to fall in a particular country. Now let's look at the options. D says lower savings. So if savings are low, this means spending should increase. If savings are low, spending should increase. But here spendings are decreasing. So D is not the correct answer. C says lower interest rates. So if interest rates are low, people can borrow more. And when people can borrow more, they can spend more. But here the spending is decreasing. But here the spending is decreasing. If you've got the availability to borrow more, so you can spend more because you've got more money at your disposal. But here the spending is decreasing. So this means you chop C off. It doesn't make sense. B says a reduction in the rate of sales tax. So if there has been a reduction in the amount of sales tax, the spending should increase. But here the spendings are falling. So again, you can chop B off. So by elimination, B, C, and D are chopped off. We've arrived at A. That's the correct answer. But now let's look at the logic as well. Why A? A says a reduction in disposable income. Yes, you see, when people have less disposable income, so this means what? They will be able to spend less. Why? Because it could be maybe because the income tax has risen, giving people less amount for spending, right? So spending will fall, purchasing power will reduce. So for 11, it has to be 8. All right, let's look at number 12. Number 12 says, which combination shows the advantages of a small firm over a large firm? We all know when the firm is small, it has what? It has better communication, it has greater independence, and the average cost would be higher or lower than if the firm size was big. If the firm size was big, the average cost would have been lower. But for a small firm, the average cost is relatively high. So better communication, it has to be a yes. So you can chop A and B. Why? Because they say no. Greater independence, it has to be a yes. So yes, you can chop A completely. Now let's look at the lower average cost. Yes, average cost has to be low. So you can chop B and C. So it has to be a yes and a yes. And the average cost has to be low. So it has to be option number C. It has to be a yes, and a no. Average cost cannot be low because the firm size is small. It's for the large firm when the average cost is at its lowest, right? Why? Because of economies of scale. They are not able to enjoy economies of scale because of their relatively small size of operation. So it has to be a yes, and a yes, and a no. So it has to be option C for number 12. All right. So for number 12, it has to be C. Why? Because we all know small firms have better communication. They have got greater independence because they can easily wind up their businesses. Yet their average cost cannot be low because they do not enjoy economies of scale like big sized firms, right? Therefore, for number 12, it has to be C. So it has to be a yes, and a no. We need to satisfy each of the three parts for this MCQ. So for 12, it has to be C. Number 13. Number 13 says, what is a variable cost for a firm? A says the cost of raw materials, B says the interest payment on existing loans, C says the rent on the factory, D says the insurance on the factory buildings. So B, C, and D are all fixed costs. It only has to be option A, the cost of the raw materials, which is the variable cost, which means that as more and more production is being done, the raw materials quantity would vary with the size of the output. Hence, the variable cost, this case is A. So for 13, it has to be A. Let's look at number 14. Number 14 talks about a table. It gives us three parts. It shows the daily average revenue and units of output sold for a firm producing bicycles over a 5-day period. So the first part of the table gives us the days. The second part gives us the average revenue. The third column shows us the units of output sold. Now, let's first calculate the total revenue. Total revenue would be average revenue multiplied by the amount of units sold. So 200 into 2 would give us $400. 160 into 4 would give us $640. 120 into 8 would give us $960. 80 into 14 would give us 1120. And 40 into 16 would give us $640. Now, let's look at the conclusion from the table. B says the firm's total revenue always increases as output rises. The firm's total revenue always increases as the output rises. Now, let's look at it. The firm's total revenue was increasing. Day 1 it was 400, day 2 it was 640, day 3 it was 960, day 4 it was 1120, but on day 5 it dipped. It fell. So B is incorrect. Alright? Now, C says the firm's prices are always greater than the total revenue. C says the firm's prices are always greater than the total revenue. We do not know about the price of the bicycle. The table gives us no information, so you can chop C off. Now we are left with only A and B. A says the firm's highest total revenue occurs at 2 units of output. So at 2 units of output, the total revenue was 400. The highest total revenue is when the firm sold 14 units. That's the correct answer, which is the firm's highest total revenue occurs at 14 units of output sold. Hence, for number 14, it is B. So you see, it gets so easy once you solve the question in a logical way. For 14, it has to be